When my husband first held our newborn daughter, his hands trembled. Not with fear, at least not the kind I recognized, but with something I couldn't name. He looked at her like she was a fragile glass ornament he wasn't sure he deserved to touch. At the time, I thought it was tenderness. Now looking back, I realize it was guilt. My name is Clara, and for the longest time, I thought I was living the kind of life women quietly dream of. Modest, ordinary, safe. We had a small home on the edge of town with peeling paint and a magnolia tree that shed petals like snow every spring. My husband, Ethan, worked in marketing. Steady job, polite smile, the kind of man who bought flowers on random Wednesdays. When I found out I was pregnant, Ethan cried. Not loud, happy tears. The silent kind that roll down without warning. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "You're my whole world now, both of you." I believed him. The first few months after Emma was born were a blur of late-night feedings, soft lullabies, and the hum of the baby monitor that became my background music. Ethan helped at first, warming bottles, rocking her when I couldn't keep my eyes open. But gradually he began to fade. At first, it was small things. He'd linger in the shower a bit longer before work, miss bedtime because of urgent meetings, forget to take photos when she smiled or reached for him. I told myself it was normal. Men don't always connect right away, I thought. Maybe he just needs time. But the distance grew like a quiet fog. Our mornings became mechanical. I'd make coffee while Emma played with her toys on the kitchen floor. Ethan would scroll through his phone, sipping in silence, barely glancing up. When I handed Emma to him, she'd reach for his face, babbling, smiling, and he'd stiffen. Sometimes he'd even hand her back with an awkward laugh. She's heavy today, he'd say. She wasn't. She was 6 months old and barely 10 pounds. I remember one morning in particular. The sun came through the curtains in soft stripes, and I was frying eggs while humming an old Norah Jones song. Emma was babbling on the floor mat, smacking her toys together. Ethan came in, shirt pressed, tie perfectly knotted, smelling faintly of cedarwood and aftershave. He bent down, not to kiss Emma, but to pick up his laptop bag. "Big meeting today," he said. "Did you want to feed her before you go?" I asked. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're better at it than I am." Then he was gone. I stared at the door long after it shut, a spatula in one hand, Emma's giggle filling the room. Something in me began to ache. Not anger yet, but confusion. The kind that lives deep in your ribs. Weeks passed and his detachment became routine. He'd sit beside me on the couch while I scrolled through photos of Emma's milestones, her first tooth, her first laugh, and he'd nod absently. "Cute," he'd say. Always just cute. No laughter, no warmth. At night, when Emma finally fell asleep, I'd crawl into bed hoping for connection, for conversation, a touch, something. But Ethan would roll over, mutter "long day," and drift into a sleep I envied. I tried to rationalize. Maybe he was depressed. Maybe work was overwhelming him. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But something deeper whispered, "No, Clara, it's not just that." The infection came a month later. It was a rainy Sunday, the kind that makes everything smell like damp earth and nostalgia. Ethan was out. He said he had to pick up some documents from the office. Emma was napping, the soft rhythm of her breathing a lullaby in itself. I was cleaning the hallway closet, sorting through winter coats and old boxes, when something caught my eye. An unfamiliar leather-bound album tucked behind the vacuum cleaner. It was thick, worn at the edges, and tied shut with a frayed ribbon. I don't know what made me untie it. Curiosity? Instinct? But when I opened that book, The world tilted. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them. A woman I didn't recognize. A child. A little boy, maybe 3 years old, with Ethan's smile. They were everywhere. On beaches, in parks, birthdays, Christmas mornings. Ethan holding the boy on his shoulders. Ethan kissing the woman's cheek. The same dimples I'd once adored. The same eyes that looked at me on our wedding day. My knees gave out. The scrapbook fell open to the last page. A handwritten note in Ethan's messy scrawl. For my real family. Someday, we'll have our chance again. I don't remember how long I sat there. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. When I finally stood, my body moved on instinct. I put the scrapbook back exactly where I found it, tied the ribbon, closed the closet door, and sat on the couch waiting for Ethan to come home. When he finally walked in, shaking off rain, smiling faintly, I studied him like a stranger. The man who had shared my bed, my life, my child, had another world hidden from me. And as he bent down to unlace his shoes, I saw it again, the tremble in his hands. This time, I knew exactly what it was. It was guilt. I don't know how I managed to speak to him that night. My mind was spinning, but my voice stayed calm, almost detached, as though my body had decided to protect me from what I was about to do. Dinner was quiet. Ethan talked about traffic, about how the rain had flooded the parking lot, about how he was thinking of asking for a promotion. Every word from his mouth sounded like noise, like a man rehearsing lines from a life that wasn't real. When he reached for the salt, our fingers brushed. That simple touch, the warmth of his skin against mine, made something inside me twist. "Ethan," I said softly, "can I ask you something?" He looked up, surprised. Of course. I didn't want to accuse. Not yet. I wanted to see how he'd lie to me. "You've been distant lately. Is everything okay?" He smiled, that practiced smile, the one that used to melt me before I knew better. "I'm just tired, Clara. New baby, work stress. It's a lot." I nodded. "You've been tired for months." He set his fork down. "Are you keeping score now?" "No," I said quietly. "Just trying to understand." He sighed, rubbed his temples. "Can we not do this tonight? I just want a peaceful meal." And that was it. The line that sealed it. Peaceful meal. As if peace was something you could fake between two people who had already stopped seeing each other. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the scrapbook. The boy's face. Ethan's arms around that woman. At 3 a.m, I got up and went to Emma's crib. She was sleeping soundly, her tiny chest rising and falling with perfect rhythm. I touched her hand. It was so small it barely wrapped around my finger. And I whispered, "You deserve a father who looks at you like you're his world." Then I decided I wouldn't confront him yet, not until I knew everything. The next morning, I played the part of the unsuspecting wife. I packed his lunch, kissed his cheek, waved from the doorway like I always did. But when his car turned the corner, I went back inside and opened the closet. This time, I photographed every page of the scrapbook, every picture, every word. Then I called in a favor. My friend Lena, who worked part-time at a local print shop, knew how to trace image metadata, timestamps, print orders, even geolocation data if it was still embedded. I sent her one of the photos. "Can you tell me when this was printed?" "Sure," she said. "You okay? You sound off." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just something for Ethan's project." When she called me back later that afternoon, her voice trembled. Clara, these photos were printed 2 months ago. 2 months. Emma was barely 4 months old then. While I was waking up at 2 a.m. to feed our daughter, Ethan was printing pictures of his other child. The next day, I followed him. He said he had a client lunch downtown. I dropped Emma off with my neighbour, Mrs. Warren, and drove 10 minutes behind him, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. He parked outside a small cafe on Maple Street. I parked across the road behind a florist van. He went inside. 5 minutes later, she arrived, the woman from the photos. I recognized her instantly. Shoulder-length auburn hair, white trench coat, smile that came too easily. And then, the little boy, running into Ethan's arms like he'd done it 1,000 times. Ethan scooped him up, kissed his forehead, whispered something that made the boy giggle. And I just sat there, numb, the rain blurring the windshield like the world itself didn't want me to see. I didn't confront him there. I couldn't. Not in front of that child, who had no part in this. Instead, I drove home, heart pounding, nausea curling in my stomach. I put Emma down for her nap, then sat at the kitchen table staring at the wall clock. Every tick of the second hand felt like a countdown to the end of my marriage. He came home around 6, smelled like coffee and cologne. "Hey," he said casually, setting his keys on the counter. "You okay?" I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw the stranger behind my husband's face. "I went through the closet today," I said quietly. He froze mid-motion. "What?" "The closet," I repeated. "Found a scrapbook." He went pale. "I know about her, Ethan, and the boy." He swallowed hard. "Clara." "Don't lie," I said sharply. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. "I've seen the photos. I followed you." He rubbed his face with both hands. "You shouldn't have done that." I laughed, bitterly. "Oh, I'm sorry. Did I ruin your double life?" "It's not what you think." "Then please," I said, standing, my heart thudding so hard it hurt, "tell me what it is." He stared at the floor, shoulders slumped. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. "Her name's Hannah. The boy's Oliver. I met her before I met you. She got pregnant. I didn't know until later. I felt dizzy." "So you've had a child all this time? You married me knowing that?" He nodded. "I thought it was over. She wanted nothing from me. But then, after you got pregnant, she reached out again. Said Oliver deserved to know his father." I laughed again, short, disbelieving. "So you just started visiting them behind my back? Printing pictures? Calling him your real family?" His head shot up. "You read that?" "Yes, Ethan. I read every word." He ran a hand through his hair, voice shaking. "That scrapbook wasn't for you to see. And yet here we are." For a moment, the room went silent. The refrigerator hummed softly. Emma stirred in the next room, her tiny cry slicing through the air like glass. Ethan's eyes flickered toward her door. And I saw it. Hesitation, not fatherly concern. Fear. "You can go," I said coldly. "She doesn't need you." "Clara, please." "No." I pointed toward the door. "Go back to your other life, your real family." He hesitated for a moment longer, then grabbed his coat and left. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the house like the final crack in something that had been breaking for months. That night, I didn't cry. I sat in the dark nursery, Emma asleep against my chest, and stared at the faint moonlight on her tiny face. She had his eyes, soft brown, with that same innocent sparkle. But she was mine now, entirely mine. And as I rocked her gently, I whispered, We're going to be okay, baby girl. I promise you that. The next morning, the house was eerily still. No sound of Ethan's electric razor buzzing. No scent of his aftershave drifting through the hallway. Just the soft coo of Emma waking in her crib, unaware that her world, our world, had changed overnight. I picked her up, held her close, and felt her tiny heartbeat against my chest. She didn't know it yet, but that day was the first of our new life. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the empty chair across from me. For years, that seat had been a symbol of comfort, of shared mornings, of laughter. Now it was just a void. When the bitterness threatened to swallow me, I reminded myself, this pain is proof that I still care. But caring didn't mean forgiving. Not yet. Around mid-morning, Lena called. I had told her everything. The scrapbook, the affair, the second family. "Oh, Clara," she said, voice heavy with sympathy. "You don't deserve this." "I know," I said flatly, "but I'm not going to sit here and let him define what happens next." "What are you planning?" "Something measured," I said. "Something he'll never see coming." Lena was quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, "You always were the calm kind of storm." That afternoon I gathered every document I could find, bank statements, joint account records, mortgage papers. It didn't take long to notice the irregularities, transfers, withdrawals, money quietly bleeding from our shared savings into an account I'd never seen before, and then the memo lines. Oliver's tuition fund, house maintenance, gift for H. My pulse quickened. He wasn't just hiding them, he was financing them, with our future. I called our bank. The woman on the line sounded hesitant when I asked to freeze the joint account. "I can do that for you, ma'am," she said gently, "but you'll need to come in person." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I replied. By evening, every cent tied to my name was secure. I moved my portion into a new account and redirected the mortgage payments. If Ethan thought he could live two lives, he'd have to pay for both. Still, I couldn't sleep. The anger that once simmered had hardened into something sharper. Resolve. At around midnight, I found myself standing in front of the closet again. The scrapbook was still there, like a ghost waiting to be acknowledged. I opened it one last time. The photos no longer broke me. They clarified me. Each smiling picture, each scribbled date was another proof of the life he'd built in shadows. At the very end of the album, tucked behind the final page, was an envelope. It wasn't sealed. Inside was a letter. My name was nowhere on it. "Hannah, I can't keep doing this. Clara's starting to notice. I'll find a way to make things right for you and Oliver. Just give me time." Time. He had plenty of that. Time to lie, time to choose, time to decide which version of himself he wanted to be. And now, I'd decide for him. The following week, I invited him over. He'd been texting non-stop, apologizing, pleading, sending long paragraphs about doing the right thing and being there for Emma. I ignored them all, until I wrote back one line. "Come by on Saturday. We need to talk about custody." He arrived precisely at 2. His face looked drawn, pale, as if the double life had finally caught up with him. When he stepped inside, his eyes darted around, maybe expecting hostility, maybe forgiveness. He found neither. I gestured toward the couch. "Sit." He did. "I want the truth this time," I said quietly. "All of it." He sighed, rubbing his jaw. "There's not much more to say, Clara. I messed up. I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you. Didn't know how." I repeated slowly, or didn't want to lose the comfort of two homes. He didn't answer. His silence was confirmation enough. I slid the letter across the table. You left this in the scrapbook. He flinched, eyes flickering over the handwriting. I'll make things right for you and Oliver, I read aloud. Was that before or after you took money from our account? His head jerked up. What? I know about the transfers, Ethan. His mouth opened, closed. It was just temporary. I was trying to help. With our money. He tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. Clara, please. I never stopped loving you. I laughed softly. Then you have a strange way of showing it. The baby monitor crackled in the background, Emma's soft, stirring sounds. Ethan looked toward it. Can I at least hold her? No, I said simply. You had your chance to be a father. You treated her like a stranger, and now that's exactly what you are. He slumped back, eyes glistening. You can't keep her from me. I'm not, I said, calm and deliberate. The court will. He frowned. You'd really take it that far? I'll do whatever it takes to protect her from growing up in the shadow of your lies. I stood up, signaling the conversation was over. You should go. He hesitated at the door. You'll regret this. I met his eyes steadily. No, Ethan. The only thing I regret is mistaking a coward for a husband. He left without another word. And when I closed that door behind him, I felt something shift inside me, like the weight of years had finally lifted off my shoulders. In the days that followed, I began rebuilding. I sold his car, technically mine since it was under my name. I contacted a lawyer, gathered evidence, and filed for separation. The house felt quieter but cleaner, freer. There were moments late at night when the silence felt like it might swallow me whole. But then Emma would stir, and I'd remember why I was doing all this. One evening, I sat in her nursery, watching her sleep under the soft glow of the nightlight. Her tiny fingers twitched, her lips curved in a dreamlike half-smile. And I thought, this is my real family. No lies, no secrets. Just her and me. 3 weeks later, a certified envelope arrived. Ethan's lawyer. Inside was a short letter requesting shared custody. I called my attorney, who advised me to stay calm, respond formally, and not engage emotionally. But I couldn't resist sending one final message. You wanted 2 families, Ethan. Now you'll have none. Not because I hate you, but because I finally love myself enough to let you go. News spreads quietly in a small town. It never announces itself. It just slips under doors, seeps through conversations at coffee shops, blooms into whispers over fences and grocery aisles. By the end of the month, everyone seemed to know. The man who used to kiss me goodbye every morning now wore the label of that guy with 2 families. I didn't tell anyone myself. I didn't need to. Truth, when left alone, tends to find its own way to daylight. Still, I noticed the shift. At the daycare, other mothers who once smiled politely now offered sympathetic glances. The clerk at the bakery stopped asking if I wanted the usual 2 croissants, just gave me one and said softly, "For you and your little one." It was strange, being both pitied and respected at once. Ethan tried to play the role of the victim at first. Mutual friends told me he claimed I'd overreacted, that it was just emotional confusion, that he never stopped loving his wife. But lies crumble fast when pressed against evidence. The scrapbook, the bank transfers, the letter, and perhaps most damning of all, Hannah herself. One Thursday afternoon, As I was folding Emma's laundry, my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. Clara? The voice was soft, tentative. Yes? This is Hannah. The world went silent for a moment. Her voice, it wasn't what I expected. Not sly or cruel, but tired, broken. I didn't know how else to reach you, she said. Ethan left. He hasn't been here for days. I stayed quiet. She continued. I found the letter he wrote me. The same one you must have found. I think he meant to fix everything, but he didn't know how. He always knew how, I said. He just didn't want to face what it would cost him. There was a pause. Then quietly she said, I didn't know he was still with you when we met. He told me you were separated. Her voice cracked. I believed him. And by the time I found out, I was pregnant. The air in the room felt heavy. I could hear Emma's soft breathing from her crib. I'm not calling to ask for forgiveness, Hannah said finally. I just thought you should know the truth. I'm done with him. I think you are too. I took a deep breath. I am. She exhaled. Good. There was something final in her tone, not bitterness but resignation. Before hanging up, she said one more thing. For what it's worth, I hope you and your daughter find peace. I never will. The line went dead. I stood there for a long time, staring at the pile of tiny baby clothes in my hands, realizing that pain had made strangers out of two women who might have been friends in another life. A few weeks later, Ethan showed up at my doorstep again. He looked thinner, unshaven, exhausted. His shirt hung loosely on him, his eyes hollow. Can I come in? He asked. No. He nodded, as if expecting that. I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry. For everything. I leaned against the doorframe. You've said that before. This time I mean it. Meaning it doesn't undo it. He looked down, clutching something in his hand. A small toy rattle, Emma's, one she must have dropped during one of his visits months ago. She looks like you, he said quietly. I saw her picture on your mum's Facebook. She's doing fine, I said, voice steady. We both are. He gave a sad, crooked smile. I'm glad. You always deserved better than me. And for the first time, I believed him. He turned to leave, and as he walked down the path, I noticed the slump in his shoulders, not of a man who'd been caught, but of one who finally understood what he'd lost. A few days later, the court hearing took place. It was brief, clinical. The judge reviewed the documents, the financial records, the letter, and Ethan's attorney's desperate attempt to paint him as emotionally misguided. But truth, once set in motion, doesn't stop. The judge awarded me full custody. Ethan was granted supervised visitation once a month. He nodded silently as the decision was read, his eyes glassy but accepting. When the gavel struck, it felt less like punishment and more like release. After the hearing, I sat in my car for a long time, watching the rain streak down the windshield. I thought of the woman I had been, the one who believed love could fix everything, who overlooked the small silences, the distant glances, the half-hearted excuses. And I realized she was gone. What remained was someone quieter, stronger, someone who had walked through betrayal and come out with dignity intact. Life began to find its rhythm again. I started freelance writing from home, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the courage for. Emma began teething. Her cries filled the house again, but this time they were reminders of life, not loss. Every night I'd rock her to sleep and whisper the same words. You'll never have to wonder if you're enough. because I would never let her feel the emptiness I had once mistaken for love. One evening, months later, I ran into one of Ethan's old co-workers at the market. He looked surprised to see me. "Hey, Clara, I heard about everything. How are you holding up?" "I'm good," I said truthfully. "Better, actually." He hesitated, then said, "Ethan quit last month. Word is he's moving out of state, starting over." I nodded. "He's good at that." He smiled awkwardly. "You, deserve peace, you know." "I already have it," I said simply. And I meant it. That night, as I tucked Emma into bed, I noticed something. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt whole. Like every corner of it had been reclaimed, every silence filled with something pure. I looked at her sleeping face and whispered, "We made it, baby. Just you and me." Her tiny hand twitched in her sleep, as if in agreement, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to breathe, not the shallow, fearful kind, but the deep, freeing kind that comes only after you've faced everything that tried to break you, and survived. The first real morning of peace came quietly. No grand event, no bright revelation, just sunlight seeping through the curtains, the sound of birds instead of silence, and Emma's soft laughter echoing from her crib. For months, my mornings had begun with the weight of what I'd lost. But that day, it began with the comfort of what I still had. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, coffee cooling beside me, watching Emma play with her wooden blocks on the floor. She giggled as they toppled over, clapped her tiny hands, and looked up at me as if to say, "See, it's okay to start again." And somehow that became my truth too. In the weeks after the divorce was finalized, I found myself relearning who I was outside of being someone's wife. It wasn't easy. Grief doesn't just vanish when the papers are signed. It lingers in the photos you can't yet delete, the songs you used to hum together, the scent of his aftershave that still clings to the hallway no matter how many times you clean. But day by day, those things lost their sting. I began volunteering twice a week at a local women's shelter. I met women whose stories mirrored mine, some worse, some different, all familiar in their ache. We didn't trade pity. We traded strength. One afternoon, a woman named Lorraine sat beside me, her eyes swollen from crying. Her husband had drained their savings account to fund another woman's lifestyle. I listened quietly as she spoke, my hands wrapped around a cup of cheap coffee that suddenly tasted like courage. When she finished, she asked, "How do you stop hating them?" I thought about that for a while before answering. "You don't," I said softly. "You just stop letting the hate guide you. It's heavy. One day you'll realize you're tired of carrying it." She nodded slowly, a tear slipping down her cheek. And I knew in that moment that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about transforming pain into empathy. By spring, Emma was walking, clumsy, determined steps that made me both proud and terrified. I'd take her to the park every afternoon, let her toddle through the grass while I sat on the bench with a thermos of tea. Sometimes I'd see couples there, laughing, bickering, sharing ice cream, and for a moment I'd feel a pang of something between envy and nostalgia. But it passed quickly. I had come to understand that not every love story is meant to last forever. Some exist just long enough to teach you what you should never settle for again. One evening, I was scrolling through my phone when a message popped up from an unknown number. "Hi, Clara. It's Ethan. I won't bother you again after this, I promise." My heart clenched, but I didn't delete it. I kept reading. "I've moved to another city. Found work with a construction firm. Hannah and the baby are fine. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm trying to be better. For all of you. Then one final line. Please tell Emma. Her dad is sorry. I stared at that message for a long time. Once upon a time I might have replied. Might have given him the comfort of my understanding. But now I knew better. Some apologies are meant to be read, not answered. I didn't reply, but I whispered his message aloud to the empty room. Not for him, but for me. And in doing so, I felt the last thread of anger loosen inside me. Months turned into a year. Emma turned 2. Curious, mischievous, full of light. We had a small birthday celebration with my parents and a few close friends. There were balloons, cupcakes, laughter, and no trace of sorrow. As I watched her blow out the candles with frosting on her nose, I realized something profound. I had survived what was meant to break me, and in the process, I had built a life stronger than the one I lost. One summer evening, after I put Emma to bed, I sat on the porch with my journal, something I hadn't done in years. I began writing a letter, not to Ethan, but to the version of myself who once begged for his love. Dear Clara, you did everything you could. You loved, trusted, forgave. None of that was wasted. It just wasn't enough for the wrong man. You walked through heartbreak and came out whole. You learned that love is not sacrifice, it's safety, and you gave that safety to your daughter, the greatest gift of all. When I finished writing, I didn't cry. I smiled. I folded the page neatly, placed it in the scrapbook, my scrapbook now, the same one that once shattered my world. But now, it told a different story. Inside were photos of Emma's first steps, her first birthday, my first published article, our first vacation, just the two of us. Page after page of proof that life goes on. Not perfectly, but beautifully. Sometimes people message me online after hearing parts of my story. They say, "You're so strong. I could never do what you did." But strength isn't something you find. It's something you build, piece by piece, out of every moment you think you can't survive and do anyway. If I learned anything from all of this, it's that truth, no matter how painful, is the only foundation worth standing on. Lies may offer comfort, but they collapse under the weight of time. And love, real love, never makes you question your worth. A few nights ago, Emma woke up crying from a bad dream. I rushed in, held her close, whispered, "It's okay. Mommy's here." She clung to me, her small hands gripping my shirt. And I thought, this is what love should feel like. Secure, safe, unconditional. As she drifted back to sleep, I stayed awake for a while, staring at her face in the soft nightlight glow. And for the first time, I whispered something to myself that I truly believed. I'm proud of the woman I've become. When I look back now, I don't see a broken marriage anymore. I see a woman who was forced to choose between illusion and truth, and chose truth, even when it burned. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if I'd never opened that scrapbook, if I'd gone on believing his distance was just exhaustion, if I'd silenced that voice in my gut that whispered, something's wrong. Maybe my life would have looked simpler, but it wouldn't have been mine. Pain has a strange way of cleansing you. It strips away the lies you built your comfort on. It takes everything familiar, your routines, your faith in people, your definition of love, and shatters it into 1,000 sharp pieces. And then slowly, you learn how to pick them up, how to rebuild, differently this time, slower, smaller, but stronger. That's what Emma and I did. We built a home out of quiet mornings and laughter-filled nights. We built trust out of routines that no longer depend on someone else showing up. We built peace out of knowing that truth, no matter how hard it hits, is always worth facing. If you've ever discovered a secret that broke your heart, I hope you remember this. You are not defined by the betrayal. You are defined by the way you rise from it. Ethan's scrapbook once felt like the end of my world, but now it's just another chapter. One that led me to the kind of life I didn't know I deserved. Sometimes healing doesn't look like forgiveness. It looks like silence. The kind that comes when you stop explaining, stop justifying, stop waiting for closure from someone who never had the courage to give it. It's choosing yourself, every single day. And that, I think, is the real story here. Not about a man who betrayed his family, but about a woman who learned she could stand on her own, and a child who would grow up never doubting that love should feel safe. Would you have done what I did? Would you have left? Or stayed, hoping love could change a liar's heart? Tell me in the comments. And remember, sometimes the hardest truth is the one that sets you free.